The Republic of South Africa is the most developed nation on the African continent. Its major cities can stand alongside the modern metropolises of Europe, America, and Asia. The country is a formidable economic motor. It alone produces and exports more than 40% of the continent's wealth and represents its strongest zone of expansion. It will be hosting the Football World Cup in 2010. With its sumptuous landscapes, it is a very popular tourist destination. Yet behind the picture postcard image lies a nation that today faces tremendous challenges. The ancient province of Transvaal is one of the great mining regions of the world. The subsoil of this lush green high plateau is home to huge quantities of diamonds, gold, uranium, and above all, platinum, a mineral for which demand is soaring and whose many uses include jewelry, catalytic pots, fertilizers, computer screens, even medical implants. The mining companies here employ almost 150,000 people and continue to open up new shafts every year. At the heart of this booming region lies Rustenburg, a city that reflects the image of today's South Africa, a place of contrasts and questions. To one side, there is an affluent population of mining industry executives, farm owners, or business people, living an American lifestyle in their wealthy villas in the hills surrounding the city. To the other side of the bustling and colorful commercial center, if you head towards the mines or the outskirts of town, you'll see endless tin shack settlements that have sprung up since the early 1980s, attracted by the mining industry. Kevin Dowling is one of the small minority of white South Africans willing to venture on an almost daily basis into these communities whose dangerous reputations mean that police and health workers hardly ever set foot in them.
This is an informal settlement called Freedom Park. There's nothing here, no electricity, no water, no refuse removal, no toilets, no services, clinics, schools, nothing. Of course, it's illegal. It's between two mine hostels serving two shafts of the Impala mine complex, and a whole lot of people ended here, especially very vulnerable women, girl children, particularly young mothers who've moved from other countries and other places in a search for a way out of poverty. They arrive here either alone or as a single mother with one or two or three children, little ones, and they are immediately caught in the poverty trap. They're illegal. If they're not illegal, it virtually amounts to the same thing. They can't get work. There is no work. And above all, there's very little work for women. And women who come from other countries cannot get an identity document, so they cannot access any of the social grants of the government. So many thousands of these women are forced into what we call survival sex. That is, the only way they can get money is to enter into sexual liaisons with men who have money. They'll get paid for that sex, and then tomorrow night they will have to be engaged again.
Most of the miners are migrants from other parts of the country or from neighboring countries who have left wives and children behind in their villages. If they want their family to join them, this is problematic since the mine workers' hostels are single-sex. These miners have a regular disposable income, but at the same time suffer from isolation. This makes them highly prone to excessive drinking and susceptible to the charms of the many women who have no alternative but to turn to prostitution. The sex is usually unprotected. Anonymous tests carried out on pregnant women suggest that 60% of the women of Freedom Park are HIV positive. The mining company and the miners' representatives tend to pass the buck between them.
One of the major challenges with it, to me, is in fact the stigma that is still surprisingly attached to the illness, even though we've been coping with the illness for the last 20 years. There's enormous stigma around HIV/AIDS, and I really believe that it's that stigma which is preventing us from getting to grips with this epidemic.
But as for companies like the mines, we would really appreciate if they can do a little bit more, because at the moment, I can assure you that we are not entirely happy with the role they are playing. It seems like they are standing on the fence and saying somebody else should, play their part.
And that has to do with why they are infected with HIV and why they die terrible deaths in those shacks, alone, without food, without support except what we are now giving them. People have got to come to a center like a hospital, and they have to wait in line all day long and be examined and then be given their drugs, and then they've got to go home. And unless there is a home care nursing component to the antiretroviral program to follow up those people, to care for them, to make sure they're taking their drugs, then inevitably problems arise with the compliance, with the actual taking of those drugs at the right time twice a day.
In addition to a team of 11 nurses making home medical visits, Bishop Dowling and his organization have opened 8 clinics like this one, housed in an old container. These clinics and their staff care for thousands of patients a week and distribute antiretroviral drugs to 600 adults and 50 children.
All right. Okay. Okay. All right.
With the financial support of the mining company, the bishop has also set up Tapalogo, a hospice for victims of AIDS. This earned him the title of International Person of the Year 2006 from the powerful American National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. He has opened an orphanage and primary school as well, and set up training courses for young people and the unemployed. This unusual and remarkable bishop is welcomed as a saviour in Freedom Park whenever he goes to the Sunday Mass. It is also held in twin containers that double as a classroom on weekdays. His stand on the use of condoms is contrary to the rulings of the Catholic Church and has brought him extensive media coverage both in South Africa and abroad. In a country where 600 people die of AIDS every day, the condoms question is rather sensitive.
Abstinence from sex before marriage and faithfulness to a single partner in a stable marriage relationship. Clearly, that is the only solution in the end which will turn around this pandemic. It's a behavior change, but it's only possible for people who are living in a social, economic, family support environment which allows them to make those choices freely without impossible burdens on their shoulders. These people cannot make those choices because they have impossible burdens on their shoulders. And so for me the issue then is, how do I protect this vulnerable woman's life? Abstinence is not an option. Marriage is not an option. The only option there is to give her the information that if you use a condom, or if you persuade your male partner to use a condom, you might have a chance of saving your life. I don't believe as a church we have a right to demand of people who are affected by HIV and AIDS that they must follow a church's official teaching. I believe in our response to them, we must give them full information about HIV and AIDS so that they understand this sickness. To give them the option. What they decide then, I believe we're informing their conscience so that they can make an accurate decision about their life.
The green hills of the Zulu country lie at the heart of South Africa's most highly populated province. KwaZulu-Natal has 11 million inhabitants and is the province worst hit by AIDS. St Mary's Hospital, on the outskirts of Durban, is one of the country's biggest AIDS centres. It distributes antiretroviral treatments to over 3,000 patients. The hospital belongs to the Catholic Church, which, here as elsewhere on the continent, is one of the principal actors in the field of healthcare. One with very large financial resources that enable it to treat hundreds of thousands of patients with the latest techniques.
We serve a population, a mixed urban and peri-urban population of about 750,000 people, and the hospital itself has got 200 beds. Obviously with a mixed, we look after children, adults, the whole gamut of patients. About 100,000 people come through our outpatients and inpatients in the course of a year. We have a very busy maternity unit that delivers about 500 patients a month. So you're looking at about 6,000 babies coming through on an annual basis.
Our area is very, very big and would need more than one hospital, more than just St. Mary's Hospital. But there is none.
In our particular province, if you walk down the street, 1 in 3 people will be HIV positive. Now what it means, of course, in the hospital environment is in a ward such as this, about 80% of the patients are suffering from complications related to HIV. And in our general outpatients, about 50%. In our antenatal clinic, 50% of the patients that present are HIV positive.
Government response has been very slow, unfortunately, and even to this day there is still some denial on parts of government people, but we just carried on.
What we face in conjunction with HIV is a big TB problem. We're starting to see malnutrition again, which we didn't used to. We had sort of thought we got over cryptococcal meningitis, a whole lot of infectious diseases that we thought we were getting on top of with better sanitation, like cholera, typhoid.
In the beginning, if a woman was tested positive, let's say she came to the antenatal clinic and was keen to be tested because she didn't trust her husband, And if she was found positive and would go home and tell him or the boyfriend that she is now HIV positive, he would either beat her, throw her out of the house, and many parents have thrown their children out of the house. They wouldn't accept it. So sex is taboo. There is no word in the language for sex or sexual activity. It's all talked around and about.
St Mary's has several mobile teams that go out to patients in rural areas, sometimes 35 kilometers or more from the hospital. This unit's schedule today includes a checkup on Dennis and his wife, both of them on antiretroviral treatment. The church has one of the highest success rates for these treatments. These visits are crucial for ensuring that patients keep taking their medication regularly, even when they're starting to feel better, and that no personal problems are hindering their recovery. Nancy has been doing this follow-up work for a few years now. And during that time, she's learned Zulu, the local language, and forged a very special bond with her patients.
Dennis was the first one who came to us in 2004. When he came to us, he had a CD4 count of 5. He was a real traditional Zulu man who no female, which most of us were at the clinic at St. Mary's, was going to tell him what to do and when to do what, which is typical of a Zulu man. We started him on ARVs. We had to do lots of counseling with him and his family because they were very traditional, so they firmly believed in traditional medicine. They then agreed to try antiretroviral therapy. He was put onto treatment, was very sick, had lots of dreams, didn't give up on his dreams even though he was so sick.
Awenza umehluko ngamaphilisi ngoba ngoleskhathi ngikule ngakabazi ngangibona nje kungekho kodwa ukupheka kwamaphilisi ngale wabo khona ukushintsha ngoba izinto eziningi ngangakwazi ukuzenza njengamazinyo sengakwazi ukuthi ngizenze mangikhathala nyaye.
He's achieved the dream of building a house. He's achieved his dream of owning a vehicle. Here he is now. Well, his CD4 count is going up very slowly, but he is getting there. He's noticed a dramatic change in his life. And now he's even telling people within his community, don't sit back. Go and check. Know your status so that you can get help easily. So yes, he's a model patient. And he's a model for anybody who's on ARVs. They do work, and here's the story. It's ignorance. It's definitely a lack of knowledge, and of course you find a lot of the patients also are come forward and are so afraid of my neighbor finding out that I'm HIV positive. So we've got to also sometimes work with the neighbor and say, hey, these people are people like everybody else. The only difference is that they are HIV positive.
Theoretically, everybody who qualifies for antiretroviral treatment should be in an antiretroviral treatment program, but in fact that is not the case. Some estimates suggest that as many as 500,000 people would qualify, and these are the people who continue to die every day, not being able to access treatment. And again, the reasons for that sometimes are that there are no treatment programs in the areas in which they live, and sometimes because they don't believe that they're sick enough to warrant going for treatment, or because they haven't yet accepted that they have got AIDS. I have felt very sad many times in South Africa because I sometimes believe we haven't taken enough leadership at political level to address AIDS. It's a country's problem, or the country's problem, and we haven't always had the kind of statement and support and encouragement that we would have wanted from the President and various people who have clout in the government. I suppose one of the biggest problems that one faces when leadership isn't clear is that people get confused, or they sort of think maybe it's not as serious as it is, and so on. And that for me is a big problem.
Johannesburg, South Africa's largest city, is at the heart of a province of nearly 10 million inhabitants, a great number of whom live in the sprawling townships, Soweto, Dobsonville, Lenasia. In the space of a few minutes, the pleasant residential areas transform into huge shanty towns like this one, Thembelihle, with its 25,000 inhabitants. Here, a group of them has decided to take its destiny into its own hands, working in conjunction with the local parish. Life in the shanty towns is extremely difficult. These 7 shacks are home to 20 people, only 5 of whom have a job of any kind. The lady of the house lives with her 7 children from 6 different fathers.
You want to know what my life's like? Well, I drink my coffee black because I can't afford milk or sugar. My toilet's a hole in the ground out behind the house. It's disgusting. You have to breathe in the stink. It's making us ill. I've got spots everywhere now. I don't work. I've got 7 children. I've no husband. I've just got my kids. I've sublet all the other sheds to pay for food for my children, and so they can go to school. That's what life's like around here. The garbage is all covered in flies. Everything just rots. There's even worms crawling around. There you are. That's life in South Africa. All that over there, that's toilets. There must have been 8 of them, one after the other. We dug there, and there's no more room to dig now. We don't know what we're going to do when the last toilets we've dug are all full up. I don't even want to talk about the stink from them. It's making us ill, but what can we do about it? There's no work. You can hardly ever find a job. All that? There's dirty water from washing and doing the laundry. This smell comes right into the house because the walls are all full of holes.
With these conditions you're living in, do you think President Mbeki and his ruling party are going to be able to do anything for you?
They're no help to us at all. It was much better under apartheid. At least there were jobs then. These days, you just can't do anything. There's no work, no housing. When they build houses, it's the privileged people who get them. To get a real house, you have to have money. When you haven't got any work, like me, all these kids and no money, what hope have you got of being able to buy or rent anywhere? I voted for this government, but it hasn't done anything for me. No, ever since I put my cross on the voting paper, this government hasn't done a thing.
What about the churches? How do they help people?
The churches, compared to the government, they're much better. At least they make sure you've got something to eat. Yes, they always give us a little something. The government hands out food, but it's always the same privileged people who get it, and not the poor people like us, the ones who need it. If you ask me, the churches are 100% better than the government.
The Justice and Peace Group of Thembelihle Catholic Church handles many of the everyday problems of local life, preventing illegal dumping, improving living conditions, mediating with the neighboring Muslim population, and helping people obtain the all-important identity cards that are essential if they are to receive a pension or qualify for the benefits that have been established for children in difficulty.
Affidavit. The first ID, okay. The second one, confirmation of the identity. All right, that you have applied, but there's a twin. Twins.
Where can we get our IDs? It is a big problem.
Sometimes I carry who applies for ID.
Let's say you've applied for an identity card, for example. Your card arrives, and the next day you want to get a birth certificate for your child. And that's when you find out you're married to somebody else. So in fact, your identity card isn't a real identity card. It might be a good thing to have a word with our counselor, so we could verify everybody's identity cards. There might be quite a lot of people who don't even know they've been married illegally. Someone should also bring up the problem of the post office, who hold on to your identity card because you haven't slipped them something to oil the wheels.
When you get to West Post, they show you a lot of IDs. Now, it's your own task to go through those IDs. One of our field workers in Soweto, Shelly, she did that last week with one ID. She was amongst the millions and millions of ID copies on the ground.
Why don't you use the address of the parish here for those who are helping in terms of IDs?
But if the ID is delivered at the parish, the owner of the ID should be the one who signs for the ID to say that I, Tony Mokheseny, I have received my ID at such a time, at such a day. So if ever Tony is not there, they won't give the ID to anybody. Because if you go to Home Affairs, sometimes they will tell you that we are understaffed. Everybody knows in South Africa. That is one song that they are singing to everybody. Home Affairs is understaffed. And if ever not having enough people to deliver services to people, it becomes a problem.
These days, many state services are under threat from absenteeism, lack of organization, and even fraud and corruption. The rich, and those with links to people in power, whenever they need an official paper, can usually grease a few palms or count on their connections, while the poor are left to pick up the scraps.
We have at one level a first world environment where people are earning very good first world earnings. But at another level, we have people who are living on less than $2 per day. And people are struggling to even provide for themselves one meal per day. For any society in the world, to have such imbalances between the rich and the poor is immoral. We are saying that we are very, very disturbed at the fact that our morality has reached the standard that it is now, which is very, very low. It is important that government should provide space and leadership in how we deal with the moral challenges.
South Africa has become the second most violent country in the world, surpassed only by Iraq. Every year, 18,000 people are murdered and 30,000 firearms are stolen. The well-off live entrenched in high-security estates behind electric fences, protected by armed guards. The police have a reputation for inefficiency and corruption. And yet the government still refuses to face facts and continues to refute all the statistics.
Crime is not that high, the way we compare it, like previously. The only thing, the difference there is that crime is now where the government is about. The government is now able to say everything which is happening in our country. Previously, it used not to be like that.
Apartheid made us a very brutal nation. It made life very brutal. It made life very cheap. Killing, maiming people for whatever purpose was simply part of life. That has continued in this country. The opportunities people can get weapons so easily, so many weapons from the liberation struggles, not only here but in Mozambique. There are huge caches.
Crime is pervasive in this country, and people have taken advantage, I think, because of human rights culture. We're promoting a human rights culture, so your criminals get rapists, murderers, and most of people, robbers who rob banks, money from banks or shopping malls. That's very much in vogue, that's very much in fashion. And those people go to prison and get released on bail, and they commit the same crimes again.
Guys come in with guns and they tell people we're going to rob you, and the people say, well, please take everything you want, but don't harm us. And I say, fine, we're going to take everything we want, but we're going to kill you anyway.
In South Africa, maybe within 30 minutes, there's a girl child that is being raped. There's a young boy that is being sodomized. There are ritual killings whereby you find that in rural areas, especially in rural South Africa, whereby the inyangas and witch doctors, they kill young people, very small children, to put that in medicine, to mix that and have whatever they want to do.
In South Africa, there's the so-called binge drinking. So a third of people who drink alcohol drink to the level of intoxication. So they don't drink during the week, usually on Friday or Saturday night. They go to a party and they get completely, they drink until they are severely intoxicated and they fall over. And when they go home, when these type of people go home with the car, or they arrive at home and they fight with their wives, then there's a big trouble. A 3-year-old child who the father was trying to shoot the mother. It was a guy who had a gun and who had a nervous breakdown and those social problems. So he's trying to murder his wife, and his wife lifted up the baby, and he shot his own daughter through the neck, and the baby was paralyzed from the neck downwards for the rest of her life, and she's living now in an institution.
People in this country, you'll find that youngsters, very young people at a tender age, they worship people that are in gangsters. People that drive nice flashy cars, that has got a gun on his hip, they see that as a hero.
We are very concerned about the levels of corruption in our society, and we're saying that government should be doing something about it.
The corruption issue is huge, and unfortunately the perception we are getting, those of us in civil society, when we look at the top leadership and middle leadership who've come into privileged positions because they were involved in the struggle, because they now belong to the political party in power, is that, they struggled, they suffered, therefore kind of, we need to get a little bit of reward for what we struggled. And so the border between honest behavior and stealing from the public is very, very gray at the moment. The quality of leadership of Mandela, of Sisulu, of Oliver Tambo, of those great heroes, the old generation of ANC leadership, is not coming through in the younger leadership. That selfless service of the country, that awareness that we are political leaders so that we can transform the lives of our people, that selfless commitment to the future of the country, I do not see in the younger politicians.
All that the government has done is that they've said to the church, across the board, don't worry, we know that the people in our party are concerned about the moral issues, and so we're going to relook at our moral policies. And I can tell you, having been in Parliament since 1999 and been involved in this since before that, there is no ways they're going to be looking at those policies. Those policies are cast in stone. And it's going to take a lot more than one little stand of the church.
In a country where 80% of the population calls itself Christian, the churches assume a very important social and political role. Whether Protestant or Catholic, the churches are active from squatters' camps to upmarket suburbs. They run schools and hospitals, monitor the shortcomings, in tune with the needs of the people. They encourage debate on issues of wealth sharing and social justice. The Catholic Church is in the minority. Only 10% of the country's Christians are Catholic. And yet it seems to be the most socially active church at grassroots level. Like its Anglican and Reform counterparts, it developed its political and social involvement under apartheid.
During the apartheid era, the Catholic Church was very much involved in social issues and certainly in the resistance to the apartheid policies.
The churches had to play a significant role within the life of this nation. The churches made bursaries available. It helped people who were incarcerated in prisons. It helped families of people who were in exile. It had to make sure that it established schools to provide education to people.
The Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference, which covers South Africa, Botswana and Swaziland, has its spacious, well-staffed headquarters in the centre of Pretoria. Its AIDS office provides antiretroviral drugs to 13,000 sufferers in 29 dioceses, making it one of the largest in the country. Its healthcare network comprises 88 hospitals and clinics and hundreds of dispensaries. Its Justice and Peace Office has set up working groups in over 1,000 parishes. The bishops may recognize the achievements of the ruling ANC party, but they don't necessarily approve of all aspects of its liberal policies, nor of its somewhat self-satisfied pronouncements, in a country where 20 out of the 50 million inhabitants are still living in terrible poverty.
We are a young democracy. Within this 12 years in democracy, a government led by ANC has done a lot. It has achieved. People have access to water, access to electricity, education for all. People are now free. You can stay wherever you want to stay, and as long as you can maintain yourself. Or, our children and our aged, and the people with disabilities, they get some grants for them to can maintain themselves. It was not like that.
Politicians plays politics. And the leadership in the religious community don't do that.
Political liberation for me means absolutely nothing unless the people and those who've been oppressed and suffered so much are liberated from their misery and poverty to live a life of dignity. I think it's much more difficult now to deal with the issues of economic justice rather than political justice. We were fighting apartheid. That was our enemy. Now you have to have very good research. That's why we have the Parliamentary office. That's why we have a Justice and Peace office. That's why we have a trade desk to specialize in issues of trade. You need specialization if we as a church are going to be able to engage in the real issues which are diminishing the quality of life of our people.
The churches have no compunction about interfering in political and parliamentary life. And once again, it's the Catholics who are the least reticent. Their Parliamentary Liaison office in Cape Town has a staff of 10, led by Father Peter John Pearson. His team confronts members of Parliament on the major problems of society, advises them on matters of budget, and helps them draw up new laws. The unit works alongside researchers and academics, as here at the University of Cape Town's Children's Institute, which campaigns hand in hand with the Church on issues of child protection.
Development is
this is where the provision and clauses lie. The problem and the weakness. 80% of services to children, protection services, prevention services, are provided by civil society. And the church is a key player in delivering those services. And the church is to be found in many communities, in areas where, you know, you don't get doctors, you don't get social workers, you don't get police officers. And the church has a very valuable contribution to make in terms of the direct delivery of some of those services, particularly in rural communities, in some of the informal settlements where there has been a lack of delivery of ECD. At the moment, just a form of alternative.
We're involved in a broad number of issues that we feel seek to address the issues of the poor and the marginalized. So that is one thing, and I think they appreciate that we act out of that commitment and conviction.
We've got a huge role to play here in the church. Our Catholic social teaching principles are our hidden resource, because we haven't worked enough at all, I think, as a church to bring this to the world. Solidarity, the common good, the primacy of the poor, the option for the poor. These we've got to translate into programs which are going to change the mentality of whole communities.
And more government has acknowledged the fact that they could and should be working hand in hand with the church, because obviously these are organizations that are geared and have the capacity to reach people on the ground.
As if its problems with poverty, AIDS and crime weren't enough, South Africa has for 10 years now been facing an influx of political and economic refugees from all over the continent. Nobody really knows how many of them there are today in South Africa. 6 million perhaps, or even 8 or 10. Their stories are deeply distressing, and their living conditions are often so dreadful as to be unimaginable.
My dad was involved in politics, and it was during this period for Moi, and the politics was very harsh. So in the process, they poisoned him. They put some poison on his drink, and he died. He passed away. And so there were like too much problems for my mother, and she couldn't be able to handle anything. So it's like the kids had to go and find their way out. I used to hear maybe from the friends that life is much easier in South Africa compared to other countries. So that's why I decided to come to South Africa. So I had to come from Kisumu to Nairobi. From Nairobi, take another bus to Dar es Salaam. From Dar es Salaam, took a bus to Zambia. From Zambia to Zimbabwe, and from Zimbabwe to South Africa. But we had to walk on foot so that we could cross the border. I was having my boy, and in Tanzania also I met a friend, and now he's the father of my other 2 kids. Until this very moment, he's not really got a job. Even me. Back at home, at least I had a little bit of secretarial knowledge in computer, but ever since I came in South Africa, I've not been able to do anything or to get any kind of job. It's very, very tough. Certificates from other countries, they don't really value it very much. So for foreigners the most jobs, like in Johannesburg especially, the only thing you can do maybe end up like being a hawker on the streets. You hawk some maybe fruits or sweets like that. Or maybe you go to these Nigerian shops and maybe help, like maybe they're selling clothes and then you have to stand and wait and call the customers. For sure, when I came to South Africa, it was not really what I expected. The South Africans, to be frank, the real South Africans, the common people, they are not very welcoming. They are not very much welcoming. Mostly they really don't welcome the foreigners. How to get, a job or something, so that you can have a stable life for the children, so that they can get the right things at the right time, so that their future is not affected. So for South Africa here, I'm still not sure, I'm not very sure, like, I don't know if I'll manage to get a job or not. My mother, now she's a widow. I had brothers and sisters, and she's been like struggling, even just to get the food, to feed them, to take them to school. The worst thing I can do to her is go back with 3 children. She can't chase me, she won't chase me. But out of the worry, like, now what am I going to do? It can really affect her. That's why I see it's better I try and survive on my own, where she doesn't see me.
The Bienvenue shelter, run by nuns of the Scalabrini order, was founded to house refugee women and their children and to help them to integrate with South African society. And it is here that Perez and her 3 children have been given a room. The shelter helps the women to obtain their temporary papers, to file their asylum claims, to get schooling for their children, or to find medical help. There are various training programs available, such as English language courses, or this computer course run by a student from Cameroon.
Normally at the shelter, we welcome ladies here until they can get on their feet. So we usually have a policy of up to maximum 6 months. And that during that time they can try and find their way. Because what we really want to encourage is that they try and integrate into the society and not stay in a place to sort of be dependent all the time. Communication is very difficult, so sometimes they're really misunderstood. Xenophobia, people don't understand where these people are coming from, what is their context, that they came here because they're, in most cases, forced to leave their countries, or otherwise they'd be killed. There's a whole issue of documentation. In the beginning, for them to get asylum seeker permits, normally they have to sort of stay long hours, sometimes days, outside Home Affairs. Yeah, we see with the children here, I think generally with children, they adapt easier. And I think that's a grace. That's something, because normally in a few days you'll see some children will be withdrawn, they'll be shy, they won't really. But after some time, once they get to know the other children, they start going to school, they start opening up. If there are other bigger problems with trauma, we normally help them to get counseling, all of that. But normally they adapt quite quickly. And, if we open up ourselves, to to really welcome these people, they will integrate, and they have a lot to offer. They have a lot to offer as a country. And obviously, depending what happens with their future, they can become very much part of us, the rainbow nation that we call South Africa. Hey, you chicken pox.
Sometimes stand at my office window and watch children coming out of school. Schools that are no longer racially classified, and children just being children, just sharing each other's friendship, just sharing their humanity. You see it there and you say these are little building blocks of a foundation for a future that must be better.
What with the hundreds of thousands of football fans who will be descending on the country for the World Cup and its 2 million tourists a year, South Africa, if it wants to hold on to its international ranking, is going to have to heal its scars and overcome its crime wave, its poverty, and its AIDS epidemic. But will the ANC and its representatives attain this goal? And will the churches manage to lead the government and the wealthy classes into greater solidarity and a willingness to share, so that at last the Rainbow Nation can really live up to its name?